Welcome to So Much Fun. I'm Colleen Murphy and I teach sewing. Today we're going to talk about collars and I'm going to show you two methods. The first method is one that you'll find when you're reading your commercial pattern and it walks you through step by step. The second method happens to be my personal favorite because I have found that the collar will not have the bulk and you don't have to worry about your points being kind of rounded. They'll be nice and pointed. And I think you'll be really pleased with the results of the second method. All right, we're going to use the same pattern piece for both techniques. And I took this from Simplicity. And on this pattern piece, it's showing you that you are going to need to cut two of the fabric and only one of the interfacing. It shows you here is your grain line direction for how you place it onto your fabric. And it's indicating here, this dotted line right here, as being where you're going to attach it to the garment at the center back. So this same pattern will be used, as I said, for both techniques. So I have already cut out the fabric and done the interfacing. So this is the upper collar. Here's your fabric. There's the upper collar. It is not interfaced. The under collar piece is interfaced. All right. So I know people, when they're doing this, they think, well, which one do we have to interface? It doesn't say. The pattern usually doesn't indicate at first whether you're interfacing the upper collar or the under collar. But the under collar is the one that is to be interfaced. And I interface the entire piece. What I like to do is take my interfacing, place it on the ironing board, and then take my fabric piece and place it wrong side of the fabric to the what's going to be the sticky side of the interfacing and press those together. I do not cut the interfacing as a separate piece. So once you have your two pieces cut and the one under collar interface, then you're ready to move to the next step. So that is sewing the bottom edge of the two pieces together. And when you do that, you're going to then press. You can first press, if you want to, press the seams open. And then that way it's easier to then go back and press a second time toward the under collar, the one that is interfaced. You want to press it toward that collar and not the upper collar. Now, by doing so, you can open it up and trim, but we're going to grade. We're trimming, but we're grading. Grading means that one of the layers is going to be less than the other. So the under collar is going to be cut down to about, in this case, it looks like I cut it at about 1/8 of an inch. And so you're going to trim that. And then when you trim the upper collar, it has to be more than that because you don't want to have a ridge here. You want that to feel as smooth as it can. So grading, I usually, when patterns say trim, most of the time I'm grading it. I don't want them to be cut at the same depth because it leaves a kind of a ridge inside your garment. So here we have sewn the lower edge, we've pressed and we've graded. All right, that's our next step. After we do that, then we want to understitch. And I have another video on the channel about understitching. Understitching is to help keep the seam that we've just sewn and pressed to the underneath side, to the under collar side. And so I've used a zigzag stitch. It's the one that makes multiple stitches as it zigzags, so that this way it will really help prevent the under collar rolling over to be seen on the upper collar. So that's an important step that you do under stitching before you move on to the next step. Now the next step is going to be sewing your short ends. And when you do that, again, you can see that I graded it, but I did not understitch. I just trimmed them at different points, like I talked about earlier. And also, when you're stitching, as you can see, I have an arrow here. I would start at the seam and go up to the upper edge or the cut edge. And I would do both the same way. I would not sew from here up there and then come over to the other side and reverse it. Be sure you're always going in the same direction. And once you've done that, you're going to trim off your corners because you want to have nice sharp points. And here is the finished product. Here is your, let me take this out of the way so you might get a better view of those points right there. And then you have the option, if you want to top stitch around that collar, you can do so. Now this is the traditional way of making the collar in preparation to sewing it onto the garment. Now I'm going to show you a second method, and I forgot to mention too that this method is what is used like with men's shirts. The difference is they have a stand, all right? And this collar that I've just shown you did not have a stand, but it's still the same process, whether you have a stand or if you don't have a stand. I want to point out that I learned this technique from Threads. They have a series of CDs called Insider Techniques. And I was really impressed with the technique of how you can make a collar with one pattern piece. So this is not my idea, and I don't want to take credit for it. I'm just showing you my version of what I learned. So we're going to use the same pattern. And I traced it off. This time I used freezer paper, all right? When I use something multiple times, a lot of times I will trace it on freezer paper rather than the paper that you have for patterns. Anyway, here is the pattern that I've traced. And the first thing you're going to do is where it says center back, right? And that center back is in reference to where it's placed when it's sewn to the garment. You're going to cut it in two. So I've cut it in two here, all right? And then you're going to take it and you're going to turn it around so that you can place them on top. And see, I've got the 5/8 marked that it was on the pattern. And I'm going to overlap it so that there is no 5/8 seam. You're not going to have a 5/8 seam. So you want to make sure the 5/8 mark on each of the ends are on top of each other, just like that. So you have two ways of making your pattern. You can make it so that you place it on the fold, and it would be where the upper collar would be placed on the fold, where it said center back. And then the under collar, when you put those two 5/8 inch seams together at the end, you're going to see now that the under collar is going at an angle. So at this point, you'll want to add an extra 5/8 inch at the center back of the under collar. You're not doing anything here where it says center back for the upper collar. That is going to be your fold. And I didn't write that word on here, but this is your fold edge, and that's where the upper collar is. Actually, the important thing is to make sure you have overlapped your 5/8 inch seam allowance so that that has been eliminated and that you have an extra 5/8 at the center back of the under collar. Now, if you don't want to do it on the fold, you can also just make enough copies that you can have it as one big piece, all right? And it's going to take extra fabric. I guess the only downside I see of doing this method is that you have to allow for more fabric from what your pattern will tell you. And so I think at one time I figured out if you could measure like from here to there, it was about 1/3 of a yard that you would have to have for this change in how you do the collar. So whether you place it on the fold or whether you make it one continuous piece, that's entirely up to you. So I have one already cut out, and I used a stripe fabric so that you could see how on the under collar it's going to be on the bias. All right. And in this case, you're not going to make a difference in the interfacing. You interface the entire thing. All right. All of it should be interfaced. And when you bring this together, I'm going to turn this around here. You bring this together like that, and you've added on your 5/8 inch seam for the center back. That's where you would sew right along that seam. That's your first seam, is sewing the center back. So once you have sewn your center back seam, then you'll be ready to sew the bottom edge of your collar. Once that's done, then again, you can do your grading. I'm going to open this up here so you can see it. You can do your grading. And then when you do your understitching, you cannot go all the way to the points. That's not possible. But the reason I really like this method is there are no seams right here at the short ends. And I think you don't have that bulk, especially at the points. It's far much neater, this method. And you have, again, the choice of whether or not you want to top stitch all the way around the collar or if you want to leave it as it is. I hope this video has been helpful for you and that you have learned something from either of these techniques, whether it be the traditional approach that you will find in your pattern, or it'll be the alternate approach that I learned through Threads magazine. Either one will be good. Just have a fun time and don't forget to subscribe and have so much fun.